Hello. Happy Tuesday. I might sound like I'm in some sort of wind tunnel on a jetliner, riding a train. It's hot, folks, so I've got my little window air conditioner running. Hope that's okay with you. Welcome to Who's Your Caddy? Welcome back. Who's Your Caddy is a weekly DFS golf show sponsored by Club Fantasy, hosted by Club Fantasy, sponsored by Women of Fantasy Football. There are so many shows and tools and so much advice out there. We just do our best to break it down in the simplest way possible by sharing our favorites, if there are any relevant news stories, some information about the course, to help you make your own informed decision. And tonight we're talking about the BMW Championship. This is a no-cut event, which I happen to love. But before I go too far, let me bring in my co-host, Mr. Adam Hallas. Mr. Hallas on what I'm still calling Twitter.
Twixer? Twix?
Twix, maybe. Adam, I know normally we talk about what happened last week. I didn't even play last week. I've been traveling. There are trains, automobiles, planes.
Shame.
I know I feel like such a fraud when I don't even get in like one minimal tournament. But yeah, August is crazy for me at work. And last week was no exception. But how did you do last week?
Well, I wrote it into the script. Let's see. How did I do? So I put $41 in, and kind of my go-to is typically I try to remember to get into our little pride tournament with our team rise or fall, and then I put a bullet into one of the more expensive GPP tournaments, and then I typically do the mini max, only because I like crunching lineups and spreading my odds out. So $41 in, $110 out. Not a bad little.
That's nice.
Yeah.
You need to add that to your bio somewhere. Like hobbies include crushing lineups.
Crushing lineups. So when Saturday ended, I was up $300, and then Sunday, like Dietrich and Tom Kim were just like, you know what? You don't need that money. I'm just going to putz around and just kind of go at our own pace.
I hate when that happens. It happens this time of year. We discussed that last week.
Yeah, because I even though I discuss it every week, I'm just like, oh yeah, these guys will do well, and then later on, I'm like, oh, you idiot! Like they could be in the top 10, but it gives them like maybe one position up in the FedEx Cup. And so yeah, they just kind of like putts around the course on the fourth round. I always forget that.
I hate that too. Well, this week, as we mentioned, the FedEx Cup playoffs are heading over to Olympia Fields Country Club, which is outside of Chicago. There are 50 remaining players. And following this event, just the top 30 are then going to move on to the tournament championship next week.
Which is a big one.
It's the big one.
It is the big one because then whatever seeding they are out of this tournament, I mentioned it last week because I was like, oh, wait a minute. I forgot it's the last tournament. So whatever seeding they have, out of this tournament, I think they'll try a little bit harder because they'll get whatever stroke advantage. So, like, if you're number one, I think you get like a 10-stroke advantage. So you start off the tournament with -10, and then it just kind of drops down from there.
I always find that so amazing. This week, we don't have to worry about that.
Mm-hmm.
But what I do love about this week is that there is no cut. All 50 players will have points, fantasy points, through the weekend. So even if, you totally bomb, depending on what you're playing, you're still going to get fantasy points. You're not going to have to worry about, oh, I only had 3 guys and this person had 5 guys. And I enjoy that bit about it, watching my guys still gain points throughout the entire weekend.
You know what? It is a good thing to have, but like I said, you're stuck with those guys all weekend. So if they're just hamming up, they're like, I'm fucking done. Guess what? They're gonna tank your lineups.
You're funny. Well, one thing I did want to point out is that the last time this event was held at Olympia Fields outside of Chicago was in 2020. So when you're looking at your data, friends out there in podcast land, you're not necessarily going to want to look at event history for 2022 or 2021 because it wasn't on this course. Not to say that doesn't matter, but I like to look at that specific course. Hello, traffic. I like to look at that specific course data. And so we don't have that since 2020 for Olympia Fields, and it was John Rahm and Dustin Johnson in a playoff where John Rahm happened to win that 2020 year at Olympia Fields. What else now that I've said Olympia Fields like 5 times should we know about Olympia Fields?
6. Well, Olympia Field is going to be a little bit tougher than what we had last week. I think the winning, it's going to be a little bit tougher last week. It's a lot longer. That's for sure. So it is a 7,300-yard par 70 with 2 par 5s, 4 par 3s, and 12 par 4s. 8 of the 12 par 4s are at least 440 yards, which makes it a little bit long, and both par 5s are over 600 yards. Those 2 par 5s are by far going to be your... So the 15, number 15 is 605, and it has a 15% bogey rate. So even though you might look for a par 5 scoring because you want to, get those birdies and make sure people, get on those par 5s and birdie, the 600 yards is quite a long par 5. So that being said, you might want to work in some driving distance into your models, because hole number 18 is 31% of the people that play hole 18 will bogey it. So it's going to be a heck of a hole to end your round on. So yeah, it's going to be a little bit tougher than it was last week. So that's for sure.
Sounds like it. That's for sure.
That's for sure.
That's for sure. I've been looking at a lot of different models, trying to figure out how do I want to go about this. And I feel like maybe we should just throw out some of the players that we have our eye on this week and maybe just why. I know normally, those of you who are tuning in, we give our top 3 picks to help you build a core. It's definitely more difficult for us to do that because they're all like the best of the best. I'm not saying I want to shy away from helping you build a core. How do I phrase this? The ones that I really have my eye on this week, I'm going to build multiple lineups because I can't fit the ones that I want because some of them are just so pricey this week.
Yeah, and we talked about it before we got on, is that the way some people are changing how they build their lineups a little bit differently this weekend, because it is a little, I wouldn't say a little bit harder, but if you play GPP like I do, which is those big tournaments that you can put multiple lineups in, you really have to nuance the ownership percentages at that point, right? If everyone's going to go to Rory, obviously you want some Rory, but how much Rory do you want? And then, what's that one core guy that's really going to give you that boost because he's at 7 or 10% ownership, which is probably going to be on the low end, which typically in a regular tournament would be mid to high, right? So
Yeah. I like to call it, if you guys tune in, team mediocrity. It's one of my favorite phrases. And it's just, I want a team that's going to finish strong enough to get me in there, especially when we're talking about these GPP contests, because if I play Rory, everyone and their mother is going to be playing Rory, or at least, a big chunk of them. And I want to find a way to maybe differentiate. Or if I am going to play Rory, then I'm really going to have to get creative. And sometimes I just don't want to be that creative with the rest of my dollars. That's, if you're playing Rory in a GPP, you're going to really want to be well versed in who you're picking up in those bottom dollar categories, because it's going to be rough.
Yeah, so to give you a little bit of what's going on here, so Roy is the highest calculated projected ownership at 26%. We got Victor Hovland, Patrick Cantlay, Tommy Fleetwood at 22%, Scotty Scheffler at 21%, Benny Ann, Byung Hoon An at 21%, and John Rahm at 20%. A lot of people picking Benny M because he's at 7,500. So they're thinking possibly that they could be his one token player that helps the lineup out, differentiate, right?
Right.
So,
well, that's kind of where I was at when I was making some of my pool today. And I'm looking at the projected rostership here. And I know one of the tools I use is not super accurate, but it gives me a good idea. And one of the names that I do kind of like in my pool this week is Jason Day. And he's got a very low projected rostership. However, he's been playing very well. When we talk team mediocrity, he's been right in there. It's been not super hit or miss. It's been okay golf. And he's 8.6 on DraftKings. We know that he's got a fairly decently long drive. So yeah, I like Jason Day, just as we talk about that rostership, as a lower rostered player at a fairly decent price, who we know will probably play okay.
Okay. You know what? I like that too. And like, as I'm going through kind of like the list here of what I see is like who I already favorited and who I didn't favorite, and who do I think might do well. If I'm going to the mid tier here, I'm going to go with my differentiator is Jordan Spieth.
Oh wow! Okay.
At 304 driving distance, I think he has driving. His approach could be a little bit better. But his tee to green and his putting has been on point, unless it's within 4 feet. I don't know why he can't make 4-footers. But he's been able to drain those longer ones. So I think at 55% driving accuracy, it is what it is. But I think Jordan, and he played well last week at the FedEx. I think he'll do again well here. He does pretty good on bent grass, which is the greens that we'll be playing on.
Yeah, I'm glad that you brought that up. I glanced at Jordan Spieth. I just felt like wasn't he a little pricey though?
Yeah, he is at 10,000.
It was a little pricey for me, a little dicey. Along the same lines, but not quite as pricey as Wyndham Clark. I mean, he's been playing fairly well. I mean, making cuts. 33, 25, 29, first, 12th. So I like his play. I like his strokes gained have been pretty good, and off the tees 314. But again, we have that accuracy of 55% driving accuracy. But I think at 8.8, I'm more comfortable with that personally. And the rostership is again very good on Wyndham Clark.
Yeah, I typically like Wyndham Clark. He didn't do well last weekend, but I think he was just fucking around because he was in the top 10 for the FedEx Cup already. Right. And so he could have been just, here for shits and giggles. So I don't mind that at all. And for rostership, he's not bad.
You're right. He came in 66th last week. I missed that one. But prior to that, he was making cuts.
He was. I mean, not only making them, he was winning.
Winning, yeah.
So, I mean, he won at the Wells Fargo, then he won the U.S. Open. And so, he hasn't been doing too bad. I think he does okay at these tournaments. And like I said, I think when you look at last week, he lost at 10 strokes almost, shots gained. I think he was just fucking around. I don't think he was really putting his effort into it because I don't think he could have gained any position whatsoever. So.
Yeah.
And
who else? What was that?
I was going to say, and typically some golfers will do that if they're higher up to give other golfers a chance to get in. Because if they play well, that bumps everything down.
Very true.
And so, go ahead.
I was just going to say, here's a really great comment. I currently have Clark, Fowler, Homa, Kim, Rose, and Thiegs. So I actually really like this lineup. 1, 2, 3, 4 of those 6 are at the top of my pool. Clark, Fowler, Homa, and Kim. I like all of those. It's not that I don't like Rose or Thiegs. Rosie's known to play well in these kind of final tournaments. And then Thigala has had quite a streak of made cuts. So I like that lineup. I think that's a fair lineup, even though we don't have to worry about a cut line this week. I think I like that, Andrew. What do you think?
I like Homa. He's been good on approach and putting, which are really when you look at this type course in the tournament, it's been the differentiator is, the approach and putting, and that's all we needed last week. And I wouldn't say it's all we need this week. I think we need a little bit more than that. I think we need distance. I think we need a little bit of the total ball striker. But overall, last week he gained 5 strokes total, and a lot of that was due to his putting and off the tee, and just overall ball striking. His approach was a little off, but by hair overall, typically he does pretty well. So I like that.
The weakest point in this might be Siwoo Kim and Justin Rose, only because they're not over 300 off the tee. However, Rosie and Siwoo are both have great driving accuracy. So there is that. And they're just under 300 yards off the tee.
Yeah, you don't need to have like a 300-yard striker.
No, but it's nice.
It is nice. The only problem I don't see with Siwoo, and I'm not saying don't play Siwoo because I've floated playing Siwoo or not, is he hasn't gained strokes and putting in the last 20 events. So he's not a very good putter.
I actually just went back and looked at Thigala, and he had been on a super hot streak of made cuts, and that fell off this last month. So that's not to say that he's not going to play well, because he did play super well in his last outing at 13th. So I think, he's going to. I like Thigala a lot. I always cheer for him.
He's a cool guy to cheer for.
He is. He's fun to play with. His rostership is just fine. It's not low. It's not too high. It's in the lower end, it looks like, of the middle of the pack safety area. And I think price-wise, you're looking really good. So I think that's of the if we're going to call value dollar-wise, of the dollar values, I do like Thigala there. That's 7,000 on DraftKings. That's really where you're going to have to start scraping, and I think that's a good scrape.
I think between Thigala and Siwoo, you have the perfect golfer, because Siwoo is really great on approach. Thigala is not that great on approach, but Thigala's flat stick saved him last week. And where, Siwoo's not great on putting, he's really good on the approach. So I think those two, if they could combine their forces, probably be a pretty good golfer. I mean, not to say that they aren't now, but.
What do you think about Lucas Glover?
So I've debated that in my head. It's like, I really like Lucas Glover. A, the story. B, like his mentality that he has. He's like, if you were told me that I would have been doing this, 6 months ago, I told you to get a therapist, because like I would have, not seen myself in the playoff. But he got a new putter, and he told his golfer up, just give me the Adam Scott specs. And so he got the same Adam Scott putter, and he's been killing it. Like, I watched him drain like 30 footers. God, it is spectacular. But that being said, now he's in fourth in the FedEx Cup. He'll do well. But like, doing well for him won't move him up all that much in the position, I don't think. So yeah.
I muted myself. So I'm thinking, are you thinking then maybe he's not going to go all out because it's not going to make that much of a difference? Or do you think I'm just wondering if it's almost like, I've got something to prove. I'm on this roll. I'm going to continue on this roll.
I'm still going to play him. Because, if you look at his stats overall in his past 5 events, he marks all the spots. Now, his driving distance is probably his only downgrade for this, right? He's at 295. And overall, but like, his strokes gained in his last 5 tournaments, it's 10 strokes gained. Like, he's been the perfect golf that we would talk about, like the full package, tee to green. His last 5 events, he's gained 8 strokes. A lot of that's been on approach, and honestly, a lot of that's been on putting as well. And those 2 things we keep talking about. So on these last tournaments, so I'm still going to play him. I just don't have high hopes for him. Like, I don't see him going up the chart. I see him, just kind of figuring some things out. Maybe, trying to figure out his, drive and stuff like that. But I don't see him. Going balls to the wall here.
Right. We haven't mentioned Ricky Fowler, have we?
I think you mentioned him a little bit.
What did you chime in? Because I like Fowler. I feel like he's really one of the most balanced players when we're talking about the skill set needed for this course. He's definitely one of the most balanced, reliable. He's not horribly pricey at 9.2 on DraftKings. And he's been playing so, pretty well. He's been playing well. I mean, not last week. He didn't play well. 23rd prior to that, barely making a cut, 42nd prior to that, but then 1st, 13th, 5th, 9th, 6th. So, I mean, Ricky Fowler, his strokes gained too are all in the plus, going up, 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 up. Other than that terrible week last week, I feel like he's a nice, reliable pick. I just wanted to check. Okay, and even rostership, we're in the safe zone if you're playing GPP tournaments. But what are your thoughts?
I think he's an okay pick. I think he's up there in the FedEx Cup standings as well. And so, like, he may have been just not worried about what he was doing last week. And so,
kind of what we're thinking about, right? Like,
yeah.
I was just curious. Give me like one that does have something to lose this week who you really want to have in your pool.
Well, I was thinking about that as well. Some guys I was looking at are JT Poston,
Me
Eric
too.
Cole. I've been looking at Eric Cole. I like Brendan Todd because he is the approach master. He is the Todd father. But you know, he's not long off the tee, and that kind of worries me a little bit. The other person, Thigala, is right on the bubble right now. He's at 31. Justin Rose is at 32. Adam Hadwin is kind of somebody I've been looking at as well. I think he could pull some things out. Again, the distance is not where I thought it'd be with him. He's a little bit under, but yeah. It's
I like
yeah.
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 Yeah. I do like JT Poston. That's one I keep coming back to quite a bit. I like the value, and when we say value, I mentioned this weekend at the Fantasy Expo. I did a what do you call it, DFS panel. And I brought up the point of when we use the word value, it doesn't always mean dollar amount. It means what is this player going to bring to your team? What value do they bring to your team in fantasy points, for instance? What I like about this is that with Poston, we can get both a dollar value and great fantasy value potentially in one. So that's why I think I keep coming back to him.
Yeah, I like Poston. I keep coming back to Lee Hodges though as well.
Okay.
Lee Hodges at 36.
Yeah. I'm looking at you guys, if you see me staring into space, I'm just scanning as we're like shouting. I'm like, that's not too bad. I like that. I do. We mentioned earlier Victor Hovland. I've seen Victor Hovland popping up as I'm trolling Twitter throughout the day. And when I was looking up just some of the course information for tonight's show, of course, they always have to throw in who their hot picks are. And Victor Hovland keeps popping up there as well. And you can tell in the rostership, he's creeping up into that danger zone.
Danger zone.
Highway 2. But he's been playing well. And I feel like, man, do I like Victor Hovland? Do I not like Victor Hovland? I don't think I like him at 10-3. I feel like that's more than I want to pay.
Yeah, I'm just a Victor Hovland fan, so I'm paying that. Now I understand that also I don't think he really has much gain. He's seventh already in the FedEx Cup standings. As of right now, he's already in the championship.
Mm-hmm.
Now I don't think if he tanks, he would even drop out of the 30th, depending on how other people do. So I could see, fading Hovland.
I'm being completely hypocritical, though, because I'm a big Max Homa fan, and he's at 9.5, and also creeping up into that highly rostered space. But man, if he hasn't been playing good, I mean, playing so good, longer off the tee, a higher driving accuracy than many of these guys. So shoot, I'm being a total hypocrite, but I'm going to probably pay that 9.5 to have Max Homa.
You know what? That's totally fine.
I know. I just wanted to out myself for being a hypocrite.
That's okay. That's totally okay.
So we've talked about, Jason Day, I feel like was a great value and because he's also very, very low rostered. That's probably the team mediocrity pick there. We've talked about Lucas Glover. We've talked about Tom Hoagie, Justin Rose, threw in a little Brendan Todd. We've talked about Wyndham Clark, some Siwoo. We've talked about some Poston. I'm just scrolling down the list here. Poston, Homa, some Hovland, and some McElroy. Is there anybody else that we should touch on that we haven't really touched? Oh, you mentioned Eric Cole. Is there anybody else you think that we should touch on tonight that we haven't touched on?
No, I think we've touched on 66% of the golfers in the tournament.
We haven't, because my pool is 12. Is that 66%?
No, it's not.
Silly. Oh, you mentioned Jordan Spieth. I thought that was probably the hottest take of the day.
It's a hot take if you're playing GPP, only because of his ownership, and he did well last week. He kind of knows these type of tournaments, and I can see him doing well. It's interesting. We didn't talk about this, but Colin Morikawa, he's dedicated every birdie he makes. He sets aside $1,000, and he's still going to take that $1,000 and help out Maui Relief. So I think that's pretty good. Yeah. So take that for a nice little feel-good story if you want to put him into your lineup.
I like that.
Mm-hmm.
That's nice. Always like a good feel-good story.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, good. I think the only person that I think I may have wanted to mention that we didn't talk about, I don't even know if I want to bring him up, but I will. Brian Harman. Another player that's just been playing really well. And when we look, he's just under 300 off the tee. Excellent accuracy. Good drive percentage. Greens and regulations, really good. 67%. I feel like where we lose Brian Harman is in the approach. And that could be harmful this week. But I do like at 8-1 and very low rostership of Brian Harman here this week too. So I wanted to throw that out there.
Yeah, in my remarks here, I'll say that Jordan Spieth is 27th. Sung J M is 28th. Chris Kirk is 29th, and Sam Burns is 30 in the FedEx Cup standing. So those people they're in, but they need to keep on playing well in order to stay in that top 30. The people that are on their butt are Thigala, Rose, Kitayama, and McCarthy. I don't think McCarthy's going to do well here, but Lee Hodges is 36. So take that for what it is.
You mentioned Lee Hodges, so I think that is definitely worth thinking about, especially at a salary of 6.1. Mm-hmm. However, we're not the only people hot on Lee Hodges, as he is creeping up in the rostership.
Yep.
So there you have it, folks. We talked about some of our faves. I love the give and take this week. Super easy flow and fun. And that's because that's what time of year it is. The funnest, most fun.
Funnest.
Thanks so much for all of you for tuning in this week. Thank you to Women of Fantasy Football for supporting us and Club Fantasy for hosting us. Tune in next week. I will be tuning in as a fan because unless I'm asleep on drugs, that happens to be my surgery day next week. So Adam will be here holding down the fort for the championship round. All right. See you guys next week. I'm trying to find the music. And here we go. Bye.